Great to have Marty here. We had him here over the offseason. We got some terrific advice. We're going to ask him. All right, we got some high-end players to ask you about. Christian McCaffrey, it's August 22nd. He's still out with a calf injury. Should we be worried? He's the first pick in most fantasy drafts. What do you think about Christian McCaffrey?
Well, how about we have I'll just talk everybody through a deep breathing exercise. It seems like every fantasy manager is holding their breath on Christian McCaffrey, right? Including my sons this morning, Jack and Austin. Dad, what am I doing with Christian McCaffrey? I'm like, you should watch FFT like everyone else.
That's right. We got 2 new viewers. Love it.
Exactly. Here we go. Ratings are through the roof this morning.
Yes.
So listen, he got hurt early in the preseason, hurt his calf. Now, here's what the situation. It is a minor tear. Anytime we say the word strain, it means a stretch and or tear of the muscle. The tear is actually minor. But what happens with particularly decelerators like the hamstring and the calf is that the tear is small, but the healthy tissue around the tear goes into spasm to protect that tear and kind of makes the injury field or injury size much larger. So the 49ers are doing right by him by keeping him out, being conservative. This can linger, be a long-term problem. He's trending in the right direction. And I believe with his experience, particularly last season, I expect him to be not only ready for season opener, but actually quite effective. All right, everyone, take a deep breath.
Yeah, I like that. And thank you for doubling our viewers, by the way, with your sons.
No, I watched 2 at 3.
Okay, 40%. Whatever.
Marty, we got another first-round running back, or at least a former first-round running back that's dealing with an injury as well. And Jahmyr Gibbs has a hamstring injury. Dan Campbell says, excuse me, that he expects him to come back to practice either at the end of this week on Sunday or next week. It seems like there's a second injury that's happened to Gibbs because he had something that he was dealing with in the offseason as well. I don't know if it was actually reported as a hamstring, but hard to know how much that will linger. Soft tissue injuries scare me, especially if there's multiple of them. So where are you at on Jahmyr Gibbs right now?
Man, what a breakout season indeed that he had, huh? It is a hamstring tear, and right away it's shut down. Very similar to the calf injury that McCaffrey's sustained, but with the hamstrings are decelerators. So if your quadriceps and your hip flexors accelerate the limb, the hamstrings decelerate. Let's call them the brakes. When you have that kind of lead speed, you need those brakes. Once again, there are 3 issues with hamstrings. First of all, the tears typically are small and in the center of a very large muscle. So this poor blood supply, which delays healing automatically. They're difficult to get because usually the depth is actually quite deep in the muscle, even with our hands and multiple modalities that we have a tendency to linger. And once again, because they're decelerators, there's always this imbalance between the accelerators and decelerators. So anything the medical staff and strength and conditioning staff can do to minimize that imbalance will help the player long-term. Most importantly, you need to be conservative with hamstring tears because if you don't deal with it in the short term, you're left with a very long-term problem. Remember last year, Justin Jefferson was out 7 weeks with a very similar hamstring tear, and the fantasy football community went bananas. So much so that Justin himself had to respond with a little bit of anger, like, guys, I'm injured. I can't play. Not my fault that I was your first-round draft pick. But that was a very smart move by the Vikings, and it paid off for them in the second half of the season.
Okay, Marty, another guy who was in the first round for us, now in round 2, Puka Nacua. Now, we had Sean McVay, who explained the injury and said it wasn't really that big of a deal. He's been pretty reliable when telling us whether injuries are a big deal or not. But in terms of explaining the injury, I still didn't really get it. So hopefully you can clarify that for us and tell us that Puka's going to be okay.
He dropped the second round? Really? Come on now. Let's keep him in the first round. Okay, so earlier, I think about 2 weeks ago in a combined practice with the Chargers, he landed really hard on his knee. Let me tell you what happened. So the knee, including other joints, have multiple areas of these small sacs of fluid called bursa sacs. And those sacs essentially have lubrication fluid in areas of high friction. So when he landed directly on his knee, he actually inflamed the bursa so much that it actually burst. Some of you might have seen folks with a large sac in the fluid on the elbow. That's usually a bursa sac. Now that sac burst creating a significant amount of fluid in the knee joint. So that's really what it's dealing with. It's not a structural injury, no supporting ligaments, ACL, MCL, meniscus, none of that was involved. But it takes very little fluid, about 10 cc's, a small test tube size of fluid, to shut down the supporting muscles of that knee. That's why they've been so conservative. So yes, I believe he'll be ready for the season opener, and it'd actually be quite effective. But I'll send out a question to you guys. It seems like after every catch, right, Puka looks like a train wreck. I mean, a car wreck, the way he tackles. I'm worried about his longevity for sure.
Really? What do you guys think? So, but you're not worried about the knee. You're just worried about he's kind of smallish and gets roughed up all the time.
Correct. And the swelling is under control, managing well. It'll be up and down as the season starts, but no concerns there, both short-term and long-term. I think it'll be quite effective even as week one comes around, but no concerns there at all. Dodge the bullet for sure.
No, I think that the injury concerns are something that maybe we don't talk enough about. He had plenty of injury problems in college. So he's got a pretty extensive injury history, and he does take a lot of hits. So it's probably worth considering. But I'm glad to know that the knee's going to be okay.
Absolutely. I would keep him at round one for some of you guys who are thinking, have a late first round pick.
I'm sorry. I wanted to follow up on Jahmyr Gibbs. Maybe it wasn't completely clear. It seemed like you had some more concerns long-term for him. Is that accurate? Like, would you be down? You're saying keep Puka Nacua in round one. Nacua and Gibbs have both fallen a little bit. Yeah. What's your long-term concern for Gibbs?
Great question, Adam. So with Gibbs, I do expect him to miss week one on the season opener, and I would not be surprised if he misses week two, only because we gave him a 4 to 6 week window, right? But being only a second-year player and that elite speed that he has, they will be and have to be conservative, very similar to Justin Jefferson.
Okay. Marty, do you have similar concerns to Jaylen Warren, who also has a hamstring injury that he's dealing with as well?
I think anytime you have elite speed, you have to be a conservative side. Even a minor tear, automatically 4 weeks. But nowadays, we really understand the anatomy, the mechanism, how the hamstring functions in a real game situations. But so yes, we're always looking for a first-time tear. Let's say without a history of hamstring tears, we're looking at 4 to 6 weeks minimum. But no long-term issues when they catch it in time.
So there's a couple of wide receivers that suffered preseason injuries, very different injuries. DeAndre Hopkins, knee injury. From what we see, he's expected to play in week one. Marquise Brown, shoulder injury. Don't know if he'll be ready for week one. These guys are falling in drafts. I just talked about Marquise Brown being wide receiver 47 over the last 3 days in NFC drafts. Do you think that when Hopkins and Brown are back, they will be themselves?
Well, we blinked, and DeAndre Hopkins is an 11-year veteran. I couldn't believe that. I was reading his bio. So he sustained a lateral collateral ligament injury, which is essentially the outside structure, the stabilizing ligament on the outside of the knee. Extremely elastic, heals beautifully, but because of his elite speed, and particularly that quick cutting action that he has, they had to be conservative. I had him at 4 to 6 weeks returning, and possibly be ready for week two. But the news as of yesterday that he's trending in the right direction, and he might be actually ready for week one. Now, what does that mean? It's not a main stabilizing ligament. Pain is the number one concern. So if he's trending in the right direction, and after last season, I wouldn't be surprised if he's ready and be very effective for week one.
Marquise Brown, you feel like he'll be back to himself? I don't think he'll be back for week one. We'll play conservative there, but that shoulder injury that Tyreek Hill apparently had with the Chiefs several years ago, is this he'll be back to being himself injury?
Yeah. A long-term, no issues, but let's talk about the severity of this injury. So when he landed in that preseason game, the collarbone, it's called the sternum, which is the breastplate, right? And the clavicle, which is the collarbone. So it's when the collarbone dislocates from your breastbone. And in his case, when he landed, that collarbone dislocated and went backwards into the neck region.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah. Which made it a medical emergency, which was incredibly managed and stabilized by the Chiefs medical staff. Now, under anesthesia in the ER, they're able to actually reduce it or put that collarbone back into this very small socket, right? And those ligaments around that area just have to heal about 4 to 6 weeks. Tyreek Hill had the same exact injury, right? And was back in 4 weeks. But 4 weeks minimum for those ligaments to heal. He basically dodged a bullet, a very serious injury, but zero long-term concerns there, and be very effective. But I would not be surprised if he's out for into week 2 of the season.
One guy who also looks like he might have dodged a bullet, Justin Herbert, at least returning to practice. Can you talk a little bit about his foot injury and whether we should be concerned?
Yeah. Well, he has a very common plantar fasciitis injury, which is inflammation of the arch of the foot. Essentially, back to show and tell, guys, right? So the plantar fascia is a very thick band of connective tissue that not only gives shock absorption to the foot, but also gives it stability. When it gets inflamed, you lose that elastic, you lose some of that shock absorption. And this is actually with his right foot, so it's that drop back. So he drops back to push offs. So imagine dropping back, and as you push off, it actually feels like you're stepping on gravel every single time. That's how painful this injury is. He was put in a walking boot. I think he was on for about 2.5 weeks, started to practice already. No long-term concerns at all. There's lots of different modifications they can do, not only with shock absorption in the cleat, in the turf, taping techniques, etc., but zero long-term concerns. So he'll be very effective, I believe, this season.
Marty, I have a question.
Please.
We have 2 very non-athletic people about to take part in an athletic event coming up for charity, as you can see here.
Adam and Dan's going to need this guy after the tennis match. Yes, thank you, Johnny, from the comments. Yes.
So
yes.
we may need to keep you on retainer, Marty, just in case. We have these 2 non-athletes that are probably going to get hurt chasing around a tennis ball.
What's the event? Tell me about the event.
Oh, the event is me versus Dan Schneier, another FFT cast member, playing tennis. We were going to do it on Wednesday, but that's draft-a-thon day, so we're going to do it on Tuesday next week.
Okay.
Dan played, he was like number 1 on his high school tennis team, but more or less has not played in the last like 15 years. I played as a kid, but stopped when I was like 10 and played sporadically throughout the years, but I've been playing a ton for the last 2 months.
Oh.
So I am ready for this challenge. Dan is getting scared. I have chronic knee issues to begin with. So yeah, I haven't hurt myself yet, but I very well could in this. This is the most important athletic event of my life. Not
that's fantastic.
not about it. There has never been a more important. Middle school basketball, we won a championship, but I was a backup. So most important athletic moment of my life.
Okay, here we go. I will bring my treatment table, be on the sideline ready for either one of you drops. I definitely got to see what what Vegas is saying about this match. So got to take a look at those numbers.
What are the odds? What are the latest odds, Heath?
I think we had Dan at -250.
Oh,
I did want to ask though, kind of as a follow-up, like, does it help reduce Adam's risk of injury that he is the same size that he was when he stopped playing when he was 10?
Wow. You know what? It does. For every extra pound of weight we gain, right? It's an extra 3 pounds on all our joints. So good job, Adam. Stay.
Hey, look at that. All right. I do.
My joints
Okay, but here's a little bit of advice for our viewers out there. The key thing with high impact sports, right, is to engage those hip muscles before you play. They'll give you a lot more shock absorption, particularly if you're playing hard court in tennis. So take that elastic band or the elastic loops, put it around the ankles, and walk side to side and backwards and forwards to really engage those glute muscles, give you a lot of shock absorption. And very similar when we engage the glutes with that elastic band, it's very similar to hitting a heavy bat or swinging a heavy bat before we go up to the plate. It makes you just a little more lively, a little ready to go, and feel a little lighter and light on your feet.
That was great. Actually, I did have one more fantasy question.
Let's go.
The players that are holding out right now on August 22nd, Jamar Chase, Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb. Should we be concerned about them, or at what point should we be concerned about them, getting hurt by rushing into things?
I reported on Aaron Rodgers last week. The biggest concern is the data is clear. You don't play preseason, injury rates go up across every position. But we are talking about pros, athletes who are extremely fit and extreme level of conditioning. So the football IQ is there, even though they might be holdouts. I promise you, they are training at the elite levels on their own in their own facilities. So not concerned there. First couple of weeks, sure, you got to get those game reps, get the timing right, but I have less concern with them. They're younger. I believe they're going to be okay and effective, but they'll get it done. You know, it always happens at the last minute. All this talk back and forth, they always get it done.
Hope so. All right, Marty, thank you so much. Please follow him on Twitter at MJSportsPT, at MJSportsPT. Marty Jaramillo, thanks for increasing our viewership, and have a great day and weekend.